And what about the concept of like naive realism? It meaning that, like, let's say people often assume, as you described, that they see reality objectively for what it is, and then when something comes in that's in conflict with, let's say, the reality that they see, they start to dismiss that.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite concepts in psychology. It's called naive realism. And it essentially just means that we all think we see reality for what it is. But we're naive in thinking that because other people can see, features of reality we're missing or see our blind spots or biases. But of course, how could you see it any other way, right? Because if you knew reality was different from what you were seeing, you just update your beliefs. And so people can get stuck in this way of thinking about the world that is, it creates actually a lot of conflict across identity groups. So this has been used to help people try to understand and unravel like intractable group conflicts. You see this a lot in American politics. You see it was used actually in trying to address like conflicts in the Middle East and Northern Ireland. So it's often a thing that happens when two groups disagree so much that they start to tune into different news sources. They start to share and follow different people on social media. They start to change their friend groups or move to neighborhoods of people like them. And as you do that, you slowly get more and more in this bubble. Academics, are accused of this all the time, that we're in our ivory tower, and we're removed from the concerns of real people. And I think a lot of academics are. And so those are the types of things that wall you off from other people. And then you get in a disagreement with them. And it's hard to tell if you're seeing it the right way or you've just been so in such a bubble that you're not experiencing the same things as them and failing to understand it. So that's something always to be aware of. If you disagree with somebody, I always like to do a naive realism check with myself first to make sure that like I'm not the one that's wrong. Just kind of like fact check myself first before I go down the rabbit hole with somebody else or go down, to the trouble of trying to like correct somebody else, because a lot of times it's just that you're not seeing it the right way or you've missed something.
So on that note of like a naive realism check, because I'd love to ask you, like, what are some ways that people can really check themselves? Because inherently it seems like the issue is that because somebody does see reality the way they see it objectively, they almost want to like dismiss other information that could be factual. And then whatever, as you mentioned, whatever identity is at stake, factual information becomes even more diluted. So it's like, how do you know what is true?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One is be aware that, for example, if you're going to like buy into something or let's say share it on social media, that's something we also study in my lab, that we're more likely to share things that align with our identity and our values. And so certain people are sharing something it's the reason they share is in part because it pushes their buttons or it signals their identity to other people really effectively, or they're doing it to fit in with whatever they think the norms of what other people believe are. And so it's easy for us to share that. It's where we tend to be naturally more skeptical of things that don't align with our identity and our values. And so it takes more effort to apply that skepticism to things that do align with our identity and values and kind of double check them. So that's something you should always be, it's kind of like a confirmation bias check on yourself. If it like lines up a little too closely with what you already believe, be extra skeptical of it, at least at first pass. So that would be one thing I think to do. The other thing, and this is something we're studying now in my lab with collaborators, is this notion of intellectual humility. People differ on this. Some people are very low on intellectual humility. They think they're always right. And they're highly just skeptical of everybody else. And they just trust facts from other people. And then there's people who are like intrinsically skeptical of their own perspective and open-minded to learning more. And it turns out that that's a really useful reality check device. So we have this study now with, in 68 countries with this, 70,000 people around the world. And we found that's one of the best predictors we found for people who didn't buy into conspiracy theories about COVID was people who scored high in intellectual humility. They were good at kind of weeding out the accurate information that the scientists were giving from the inaccurate conspiracy theories that were spreading. And I think it's because they're constantly, whenever they get information, they're being skeptical of what they believe and going to higher quality sources. So I would also say the last thing I would suggest is we have a chapter on dissent. And what you want to do is bake dissent into your norms of whatever group you run. So I once gave this talk with the CFO of eBay, Maynard Webb, and he told me in the early days of eBay, what they would do is at their C-suite meetings, they would have take turns. Everybody had to take a turn wearing a black helmet. And that meant that they were the devil's advocate for the meeting. And no matter how much they agreed with the ideas, they had to poke holes in them. And the research shows that as long as one person dissents, even if they're wrong, it frees up the discussion for other people to think about new things or poke holes in bad ideas. And it tends to lead groups to better decisions. So you can like bake this into your practices and procedures and norms of whatever group you're part of to help make sure that your blind spots get caught.